Yeah. Do it. Right now, they're deciding whether or not Tiana is going to be
All set. Can you start right now?
All right, so welcome candidates, audience members in the McNeil room, and those of you watching on RPI TV to the 2015 GM debate. I'm here today with two great candidates for Grand Marshal, Marcus Flowers and Michael Hahn, who are both competing for your vote. Hopefully this debate will help our student body make an informed decision on who should be the 150th GM here at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. Following opening statements, candidates will have a chance to answer questions and short rebuttals will be allowed. Also, audience members here today can raise their hand if they'd like to submit a question. Someone will run over and you can write your questions down, and as long as your question is appropriate and it won't be a repeat of something that will be asked or has already been asked, it will be presented to the candidates. So without further ado, each of the candidates has 2 minutes for an opening statement, and we'll start with Michael and then move on to Marcus.
Hello everyone, my name is Michael Hahn and I'm running for Grand Marshal. I'm running for Grand Marshal because I've been on the Student Senate for a number of years, and I think we work on a lot of great projects, but the visibility and transparency and accountability is not quite there yet. I believe that by running on these three platforms, we can work on projects that the students will actually care about, the students will hear about, and the students can get involved with. Through transparency, I want to create a greater awareness of what the Senate is working on so that students can come to us with any kind of concerns or ideas. With visibility, I want to focus on the tangibles. I want to work on projects that students can point to and say, this is what the Senate has contributed, this is what the student body has contributed to our campus. And with accountability, I want to ensure that we're working on projects that are given to us by the students, not just brainstormed by senators in a meeting. Thank you.
Hey, Marcus.
My name is Marcus Flowers, and I'm running for Grand Marshal because I believe that academics are the most important thing on our campus. I believe that if you develop more resources for student academics, that gives them more liberty with the rest of their studies. If you develop more resources, that prepares them better for their career. That allows them to have a more comfortable learning environment. It allows them to really interact with their faculty more and understand, what they're going to be doing with their major and why they got involved in the first place. And I believe that all starts with focusing student government and the Senate as a whole on making sure that we have the right conversations to make sure that we make this university the best that it can be. And beyond that, I want student academics to be in a good place, so that way we can better expand the community at RPI. I want to expand it past the limit between ECAV and Blitman. I want to expand it past Troy. I want to expand it to an area where students feel that the entire Capital District region, Albany, is really at their disposal, that they can take full advantage of that. And I believe that starts with making sure that there are initiatives to open up the community. That starts with senators being very interactive with their constituents. That means students interacting on student-led projects, not only at our university, but at universities nearby. There's 4 colleges very close by that I'd like to see a lot of new projects with. And I believe that if we take the first steps towards making these projects a thing, then that will be the best thing for this university and making the RPI experience the most memorable that it can be. Thank you.
So then moving on from the opening statements, the first question is, what will be the first item on your agenda that you will strive for if elected? And we'll start with Marcus.
The first item on my agenda, if I were to be elected Grand Marshal, is to make sure that there is a good documentation between the past leadership and the current leadership. That means that we will be able to continue anything that's being done without losing momentum due to a change in leadership, and that means that we'll be best informed so that we can make sure that we maintain the idea of the student spirit that was behind those projects in the first place, and then we can work towards making sure that students understand what's going on with these projects and getting more people involved, because that's the best thing that we've had is student contributions and working directly in student government.
Okay, thank you. Michael?
So my first goal as Grand Marshal would be to find and appoint committee chairs that are passionate about their work, that know what they want to do straight from the beginning. I believe the Senate lives through its committees. We work on projects through our committees, like the Student Life Committee, Academic Affairs Committee, and the committee that I chaired this year, the Facilities and Services Committee. Those are our 3 project-based committees, and I believe the brunt of our work comes through these committees, and it's important to make sure that the committee chairs that are going to be leading these know what they want to do and have the plan and have an action plan ready, because otherwise we can't achieve the goals that we want to within our short term.
Thank you. And then moving on to the next question, why do you feel your platform best matches the needs of the student body? And we'll start with Michael.
I think my platform addresses the needs of the student body because the Senate works on a lot of great projects, but like I said, students don't hear about it as much as I believe they should. For example, one of the projects we're working on this year is a proposal that will bring a pharmacy to the union. Every time I've been going around campaigning, I've mentioned this, and everyone has been telling me, wow, this is such a great idea. How much have you guys done so far? And we've worked a full year on this, and we've gotten to a point where we want to send out a request for information, but I don't think that's good enough. I think we need to keep pressuring, keep moving along, and have tangible goals ready for the end of the semester and the end of the year so that we can see positive change within our term, because our long-term projects are very important because they have greater impacts, but unless we break it down into smaller tasks, the transition between terms becomes much more difficult.
Okay, thank you. Marcus?
Pardon me, could you repeat the question just to make sure I fully answer it?
Sure. Why do you feel your platform best matches the needs of the student body?
So, in my time as Senate, I started as a sophomore. At the end of my freshman year, I went into my sophomore year as a senator. In that first year, I really got to experience a lot of, the RPI life. I got to be part of different clubs. I got to help found a club. I got to see a lot of different perspectives in a very short amount of time. And so through that and the students that I met during that time, I really feel like I've kept a good connection and had a good idea of what students really see, is on campus, what isn't available on campus, but also what they think is possible for us to accomplish on campus. And I really want to make sure that students know that they can break down that barrier of what's possible, what's not possible, what is in existence, what isn't in existence. And that all comes through with making sure students are more involved with student government. And so I believe that my platform best answers that because it focuses on what students talk about the most. That's academics. That is the one thing that we came here for. That is what's going to keep us going here, and that's what we come to leave this university with, and that's what we talk about when we go on with the rest of our lives, is what did we learn in those 4 years or more here. So that's why I think that my platform best addresses that, because I make sure that when that is certainly in place and that you have a good foundation with a variety of resources, then you can expand yourselves to really being involved with what makes you passionate on campus, what makes the RPI experience the best that it can be. And I believe that making sure that students have the best time that they can here is the most important thing to students, and that's why my platform best addresses it.
Okay. Thank you. So moving on, the next question is, do you wish to continue any of previous GM Kyle Garaga's goals and policies, and if so, why? And we'll start with Michael.
you repeat the question?
Do you wish to continue any of previous GM Kyle Carraga's goals and policies, and if so, why?
Yes, we've worked on a lot of projects this year, but some of them have not reached completion quite yet. Like I mentioned, the pharmacy proposal. We have an ongoing document with residence hall improvements, which will be used when the quad is renovated this summer. And our suggestions and our recommendations will be taken into account when that happens. These are things that go on every year, and these are things that are going to have to continue into the next year. So I definitely think that Kyle's goals and Kyle's achievements are numerous, but they do have to be continued into the next term.
Okay, thank you. Marcus?
One of the greatest achievements, I think, of this past Senate is the structure that was given to the committees where the real hard work of Senate is done. We've operated with a project-focused committee structure where the committees are broken down into smaller groups, sometimes subcommittees, to really focus on that project area, to focus on making sure that that area gets addressed the best that it can, but also making sure that the students in that group are very passionate about it. And I think that really helped get a lot of non-senators, non-student government students really involved with what they really care about, whether there's a small project area. If they want to work in academics, but they only really care about making things for research better, that's where they had the opportunity to do that. And so I think that's the greatest thing that's come from this last year. I absolutely want to continue that because it's gotten the most student input that I've seen in my time here. It's gotten the most student initiative, and it's gotten students to understand that student government is about them and not just about making sure that the system continues as it is, but making sure that we make the improvements that we want to see on campus, and making sure that we really take campus into our own hands and make it what we think as students is the best possible version of RPI.
All right, thank you. And then moving on to the next question, can you give some concrete, tangible successes that you had at RPI that qualify you to be GM? And we'll start with Marcus.
The successes that I think make me best for Grand Marshal are that I've taken ideas that students have thought to be out of their reach, out of their area of jurisdiction, out of where they have a voice, and I've made it not only from an idea to a project plan, but then taking that forward to taking it into a new area that previously had not been investigated. In the last 4 years, academics has not been a high priority of student government. It's been something that only very recent in the last year was breached, and that came from the work with the Academic Affairs Committee, which I chaired, and the students that I worked with, where we really got to explore an environment where the faculty were not used to us coming to them with these issues. Students were not used to us coming to them with these issues and saying that we're going to do this. People didn't believe that we could do that, and so I think that the ability to take that idea and change that focus and then make that successful, make students understand that you can take things from the next step of just an idea or a comment and make it a huge change on campus. I think that's what makes me best to be Grand Marshal, is that I've done that and I can continue to do that in the chair.
Okay, thank you.
So I believe I am the best candidate for Grand Marshal because I have these successes. I've been chair of the Facilities and Services Committee this year, and we've achieved a number of great projects. The one that I'm most passionate about is the picnic tables project, where we acquired funding from the administration and the executive board for 15 new picnic tables, which are actually going to be coming in this Friday. And we're going to ask student groups on campus to build them, and we're going to put a plaque on it that says, "This table was brought to you by this group." And I think it allows students to really take hold in something on campus, contribute to our campus in a positive way. In addition to that, we just acquired funding for our Green Revolving Fund, one of our seed projects. This past Monday, we acquired funding for $3,900 to install energy efficient software onto the computers in the VCC to start it as a pilot program. Many of you have seen our shuttle service survey that's in every shuttle. We're gathering feedback on what makes the shuttle service, what complaints do students have, and what kind of improvements do they want to see. And we're meeting with a representative from Parking and Transportation next Wednesday to go over those. We've acquired 2 transponders for the Rensselaer Student Auto Shop so that they can access their shop during the hours of 9 to 5 when that gate is down. We're working on a project. I can go on, but in the end, I have the experience, I have the successes, and I hope it's clear that this track record will keep going into my term as Grand Marshal. But I want to focus more on the tangibles, which is why I decided to be, or I applied to be the Facilities and Services Committee Chair.
Okay, thank you. So then moving on to the next question. Both of you advocate for Senate transparency and openness in your platforms. Why do you feel this is an important issue, and how do you hope to accomplish it? And we'll start with Michael.
So I think Kyle did a great job this year, along with Jen, our communications chair, of improving our communications this year, letting students be more aware of the process. But I think there's still a barrier when it comes to getting to know who your senators are. A lot of people know who their IFC rep or their panel rep, or for independent students, their independent representatives. But I think the barrier to getting to know your senator and approaching them with any kind of concerns that you might have is still existing. One of the concerns this year was raised about the UAR, and many students came to their class president to ask about what was going on. And I don't think the class president was the best person to reach out to. And the best person to reach out to would be your senators. So I think there's still that gap between understanding what the role of the Senate is and what the role of class council is versus executive board, and I want to bridge that gap. I want to make sure students understand the kind of projects we work on, what our scope is, what we can do to advocate for student rights, what we can do to advocate for student ideas and initiatives.
So can you give some examples of what specifically you would do to bridge that gap?
So what I want to do is I want to focus our social media strategy. A lot of what we do right now is on Reddit. We post something on Reddit and then we link back to that on Facebook or Twitter. And I want to use the social media platforms for what they're meant to be. Reddit, I think, has a great use for discussion. We also have a new Senate student government website, which I plan on creating a discussion board where students can talk about the ideas that we have instead of just on Reddit. I want to use Facebook to interact with senators a little bit more. So getting to know your senator is something I want to see on a regular basis. And lastly, we used to do this thing called Dinner with the Senate, where we go into the dining halls and eat with students and talk about the ideas that we have. And I want to see that continued. It stopped this year, and I want to see it continued because the best way to get ideas and understand what students are thinking is to talk to them directly. We do a lot of surveys and a lot of asking on Facebook or something like that to get ideas, but I think the best way is to go to these groups directly and ask them, hey, what do you want us to do? What are your complaints about this school right now?
Great, thank you. And then Marcus, back to the original question about Senate transparency and openness. Why do you feel this is an important issue, and how do you hope to accomplish it?
This is an important issue to me because, as I said before, the student-led projects, the initiatives that are started by students and not just by people who are in student government, are some of the best things that we have. They're one of the most valuable things that student government's been given, is the opportunity to work with students on something that they said that they care about. So you know from the get-go that this is something that they're passionate about. You know from the right away that you're doing things that are in the spirit of the RPI community. And so to increase that, I want to make sure that senators are having the best face-to-face time with the community as a whole, and that's a large responsibility. It most certainly is. That's why we have social media to help as a support tool. But recently we fall into social media as the main tool, and I think that it really does come back to the face-to-face interactions, making sure that that is the first way that we try to go about things. We've had tabling this year with the Senate Student Government Communications Chair and their group, and I think that that's a good thing to do. But what I liked seeing last year was what we did, which was Red Polo Days, where the student government elected officials really wore their outfits. They wore the things that said that they were a senator on it. So that way, when they left the table that they were working at for that day, people still knew who they were. People still knew that's what they're involved in. And so if they did have a comment or a question, then they could figure that out. Because when I was doing those events, that's when I was approached the most. That's when people usually said, good things, bad things about student government, good things, bad things about campus. But that was when they knew that it was more than just that 2 hours I was sitting at a table, that I was their senator the entire year. So projects like that, where we go out there into the community, including Dinner in Commons, different forums, because I think that a regular sort of open discussion in person is a good way to facilitate discussions on Reddit, because students who are really passionate about what they want to see on campus will come out and they will talk to us face to face.
All right, thank you very much. And now a question from the audience was, how will your term as Grand Marshal affect RPI 10 years from now? And we'll start with Marcus.
As I may have said before, a lot of what I want to do is long-term. I really believe that the conversations that need to happen are the ones that will affect things in the future. We shouldn't be filtering things based on what we can accomplish in this short time here, because we really do have a short time here. And that's why I really want to focus on resources for academics, things that make the studying habits easier for students, make things so that when they are pushed into the future, the first version might not be the best that we have, but it allows students to say, hey, I really enjoyed having this resource here. I enjoyed having access to this mentor for my 4,000 level course. But I think it would be better if we did X, Y, Z. But that conversation can't happen until we have the first step where we make that project and we make it into something that we can be proud of. So that's why I think that first step is the most important for that 10-year progress. That's why I also want to work on more relationships with the nearby communities. We're not going to be able to flip that in 365 days. But in 10 years from now, I don't want it to be uncommon for someone to say, I'm from Albany, but I came here for this, and then someone to respond with, oh yes, I was going over there for event XYZ. And that starts with us making sure that we have organizations that have similar passions, similar goals, and really just want to help the student community at their school. We make sure that we understand that we're not in this alone, that we do have other schools that do want to interact with new student bodies, because expanding the community after supporting academics is a long-term goal for RPI, and I believe that I'm the best one to do that.
Okay, thank you.
As I've maintained multiple times, I believe I want to focus entirely on tangibles. I don't want to focus on these. A lot of what we do as Senate is attending meetings, sending emails, or writing proposals. And a lot of the time we don't have much to show for it. And I want to be able to point and say something, and say, this is what the Senate has accomplished, this is what the student body has given us, and what we've done as students to bring some positive change to our campus. That's what I want to focus on, and in 10 years I want that to still be standing. Many of these ideas are still in my head, but I believe most of the ideas should be coming from the student body. So I think my term as Grand Marshal should affect the next 10 years by me focusing on the tangibles, focusing on not only our long-term projects, because we do need to continue our long-term projects. Those are the ones that have the greatest impact, but also working on the smaller projects that students can take more of a hold in and students can be more involved in the process.
Okay, thank you. And then moving on to the next question, it is one of the most controversial issues of last semester was the revocation of universal access. What is your stance on the issue? And I'll start with Marcus.
In terms of universal access, that was a reaction by the RPI administration that they had to do to protect their students. They had to protect the image of the university, and so the best thing that they could do was to close down access, to the dorms, because there was a series of robberies, and they did not show any signs of stopping. Now, as students, it is our job, our responsibility, and our right to have these discussions with them to make sure that they understand that these are inconveniences for us on a day-to-day basis. In inclement weather, this is forcing us to take undesirable pathways. This is causing us to have issues transporting things inside and outside of our residence halls, which we should have the most clear access to, because this is where we live. This is where we rest at night. This is where we have the passions that really enhance us to do best in our academics, in our extracurriculars, in our sports, fraternities, sororities. Really, it's our home base. And so we need to make sure that they understand that this is what is interfering with our day-to-day lives, and that, while they are certainly in the capability of shutting down access, that we need to have the discussions that they understand how important it is to us. And as Grand Marshal, who is in charge of advocating for student rights to the administration, that is one of the things I most certainly want to prioritize and make sure that the conversations do continue, and that we don't wait for a clear have it all back. We have to collaborate and understand that this is something where we all want to make the university better, and so it comes with working together with the administration to accomplish that.
Okay, thank you.
So my stance on universal access is I believe we should have it back. I think one thing to keep into perspective is I don't think we're going to get it back with a flip of a switch. We do need to make this an iterative process. So right now we have a subcommittee in the Student Life Committee called the Student Rights Subcommittee, which is focused on ways that we can, strategies we can use to get universal access back. That includes clustered access, which is you get access to a small cluster of dorms near you, or points of multiple access, eventually getting to the final goal of getting universal access back. I think we just need to keep our perspective on this, because it is a safety issue. The administration made this decision based on student safety, and because of that, I think we need to be more involved with the discussion, because it does affect our lives every day. It does affect all the students that live on campus. So it is an important topic that we need to address. It was addressed this past Senate meeting, our last Senate meeting, through a petition that reached 250 signatures. So we tasked the Student Life Committee with addressing this issue, and I hope that we can continue looking at it in the future.
All right, thank you. So then another question from the audience. What would you change about the way Senate operated this year? And we'll start with Michael.
One of the things that I was a little dissatisfied with the Senate this year was our general body meetings tended to be, our discussion tended to be a bit circular. So our last meeting actually went from 8 p.m. to 11:45, which is actually very long. And I think a lot can be done to increase efficiency, increase our discussion, increase the amount that we talk, increase the amount of things that we talk about, but in less amount of time. Because we need to focus our discussion because all of us are here, all of us in the Senate are here because we care about the school. All of you guys are here because you guys care about the school and want to make the right decision. And I think the best way to do that is to focus our discussion and keep things moving. Another thing is we have achieved a great amount of things, but like I said, there's not a whole lot of tangibles there. I think a lot of what we do is meeting with administration and saying, this is what we want, and administration says, all right, we will take that into account, and we'll see you later. And I think we need to keep pushing and say, this is what the students want, this is what senators want. And I believe administrators respect our opinion and want to see students succeed and enjoy life on campus. So we just need to recognize that and keep moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Marcus?
I believe that one of the things that can be improved with the Student Senate as a whole is indeed in the general body meetings, because with the changes to structure that we had over the last year under the previous Grand Marshal, we've had an insane increase in the number of student initiatives and projects that are coming through, in addition to the regular business that we have where we deal with things like the union annual report or changes to administration policy. But I think that the thing that's most important is that we make sure that we can handle this new influx of student ideas and student passions. And I want to make sure that we have better documentation about what goes on. So that means that when you have something to present in Senate and when you are presenting to your constituents afterwards, you have a written document telling you exactly what happened, making sure that everyone is getting the full story of what happened. You can give a summarized version, but at the end of the day, when it comes to being an IFC rep, you know, if you give your spiel and there's still more questions, you should have a written piece of paper saying, this is what happened at the Senate meeting. If this is something that's important to you, this is who you can contact. So having documentation is one of the first steps. I also want to work on an early Senate training program. Robert's Rules of Order is how we operate, and making sure that everyone understands that and understands what we mean when we say redundant discussion, what we mean when we say, you know, that this is off topic, making sure that students understand that when they enter the room, because this also goes for the students that attend our meetings that are not senators. So I want to make sure that everyone is more aware of how things can run, so in that way we can get through our business better and make sure that we're a better voice for the student body.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next question, what do you feel is the best form of communication between the Senate and the students? And we'll start with Marcus.
As I said earlier, I believe that face-to-face communication is the absolute best method of getting your point across, making sure that you understand the full story, and really being able to have the exchange that makes it so that you can understand the idea, not just receiving one message and saying, I'll think about it, because that doesn't give you any way to really get into the details, ask the quick questions, understand how the person's feeling about the idea, who's behind them on it. I think that that's the most important form of communication that needs to be enhanced through more efforts through individual senators and the Senate as a whole. We need to organize ourselves in a way that we continually reach out to the community, not just by putting up posters, but making sure that they know who we are. So that again goes back to things like Red Polo Days, making sure they know for an entire day who we are, and that's not something that we go into for a few hours every week and then we're not doing that for the rest of the week, because this is a week-long commitment. So making sure that who we are allows them to have the casual conversations that really lead to the student ideas that make it to the Senate general body meetings and then eventually to the table of the administration where we want them to be.
Thank you.
So like I've always maintained, I also agree that direct face-to-face contact is the best method of communication when it comes to talking about the Senate, about our projects. During my campaign, I've gone around to a lot of fraternities, sororities, IFC and Panhandle, club meetings, all different kinds of meetings to get people's votes and talk to them about the issues that are at hand. But I don't think that should end tomorrow after, if I get elected. I want to keep going around to different meetings and ask students directly, hey, do you think this is the best way that we should be going about this project? Do you actually care about this project? Do you want to see this implemented on campus? I think asking students directly instead of sending out a survey is the best way, because you get that honest answer, you get the direct answer instead of avoiding maybe something else. In addition to that, I think the Dinner with the Senate idea and the Red Polo Days, like Marcus mentioned, are things that do need to continue because students need to interact with their senators and be able to go to them with any kind of ideas, concerns that they might have about stuff that's going on our campus. Because ultimately, we are elected by the student body. We should act as a voice for the student body, not act on our own.
All right, thank you very much. And then moving on to the next question. What do you feel is the strongest point in your opponent's platform? We'll start with Michael.
I think the strongest point of Marcus's platform is the idea of that we need to reach out to our community a little bit more. This year we had a community relations committee which wasn't able to fulfill its goals this semester or this term, and I think there is a lot of potential out there for interacting with different schools, interacting with different clubs or organizations on off campus, to make sure that all of our philanthropic clubs, for example, can find organizations that are in the city of Troy or in the Albany region and can actually contribute positively to our community.
Okay, thank you.
I believe that the most important point of Michael Hahn's platform is that we make sure that we have accountability for all the senators. I believe that that's the most important point because really what it comes down to is making sure that we have the face-to-face conversations, making sure that we have the ability to have our students come to their senators directly. And so that accountability and making sure that every student has the ability to come in and express their passions as a student, as a graduate student, really as anyone who on this campus has an investment. I believe that that's the most important thing that we need to do, and that comes with accountability for the senators who work together as an organization and not as individuals.
Okay, thank you. And is your microphone still?
No.
I guess we can share.
I'm not really sure, but I guess if that's the best way to do this.
I can speak up if that works for you.
That's fine then.
All right, we got this.
So we'll move on to the next question. And if elected, what part of your platform would you consider to be your most ambitious or give you the most trouble? And we will start with Michael.
Can you repeat the last part of the question again? Sorry.
What part of your platform would you consider to be your most ambitious or would give you the most trouble?
I think when it comes to our project work, when it comes to the tangibles, it is important that we set our goals very early on. And I think it is hard to figure out what we want to do when we start planning over the summer for the upcoming year. And one of the most important and challenging things to do will actually be to identify how do we get to the next level, because we can write a proposal within a year and get that sent into administration, but how do we get past that and say we want to submit the proposal, we want to go through administration and have that physical finished product by the end of the year? How do we accelerate that process? And that's something that is definitely a challenge because administration often moves a lot slower because they're handling many more things than we are as students when it comes to administrative things. But I think the important thing to recognize is we need to figure out the steps in order to get to our end goal. And I think breaking it down into smaller steps is obviously the best choice. But that I see as the hardest or the biggest challenge in my upcoming term.
And we're back. All right, awesome. I believe that the most ambitious point of my platform is reaching out to the communities outside of RPI. It's not something that's been done regularly. It's something that has happened on occasion, but it hasn't happened on the scale that I hope to push it towards. It hasn't happened on the scale where it's casual between student groups, between both campuses. It hasn't happened yet on the scale where it's something that you can expect on a regular basis and not be surprised by the event happening. I believe that that's the most ambitious also because as RPI students, we generally have an understanding of what's on our campus, what isn't on our campus, what we want to see on our campus. The hardest part about expanding to the community is getting everyone else who isn't living the exact same lifestyle that we are, making sure that they can understand what's going on, making sure that they understand what we're looking for, but also that we have things to offer them. And this comes with a lot of project planning. This comes with a lot of communication. This comes with a lot of pushing and pushing that at first may not seem to yield results, but it's making sure that we understand that once we do get to a point where someone says, yes, I'd like to work on this, that we go after it and that we don't stop after accomplishing one event or two events or three. We make sure that we continually push for this so that eventually they come to us asking for help with things. And so that way when we have sister and brother organizations at different schools working together, that it becomes an expectation and not a specialty for that year.
Okay, thank you very much. And a question from the audience. Your platforms send the Senate down different paths. Why do you feel your ideas are most important in the evolution of student leadership? And we'll start with Michael.
So the Student Senate works on many different things right now. We have the academics, we have student life, we have facilities and services, and all of these things we have done a great job this year addressing. But I think the most important thing is to identify how do we improve, how do we get to the next level, and to get to that next level, I think we need to improve the foundation upon which these projects are held. Because ultimately, if we don't have a solid foundation, if we don't have the methods to get our projects done, it doesn't matter what the ideas are. They're not going to get accomplished. And I think because of that, we can get ideas from the student body by reaching out to them directly. We have the new petitions website, which is very successful this year. We have these methods to get ideas, but we don't have the system in place to finish our projects to completion and have them have tangible outcomes. We have done that with a number of our projects this year, but not all of them. And I want to see that continue into our next term.
Thank you.
Could you repeat the question one more time?
Sure. Your platforms send the Senate down different paths. Why do you feel your ideas are most important as the next step in the evolution of student leadership?
I believe my ideas are the most important in the evolution of student leadership because it explores new areas. And I believe that if we continue to work in the same areas, that we will continue to learn things slowly, but not as quickly as we need to be. I believe that working into new areas challenges us. It forces us to really step outside of what we're used to, what we're comfortable with, and really make sure that we're doing things that when we say, well, we've never done this before, so we want to make sure we do it right. We don't say, well, we're not going to go that far because that's how it's been in the past. I think that it really allows students to see the full potential of what they're capable of, the full potential of what student government's capable of. And by having that as a resource and making sure that students can go and explore these new areas of organization and leadership, that it really set the bar a lot higher. And as we know, when students are challenged and the bar is set above them, that they really will reach for that bar. They will accomplish things. And I believe that that's what student government can really bring to the RPI community.
Okay, thank you very much. So next question. A recent introduction was the petitions page. How do you feel this page will be best used during your time as GM? And we'll start with Marcus.
I believe that the petition site does two things that really are beautiful. The first is that it makes sure that students, have their voice heard when they do have something that they care about. If the Student Senate isn't addressing it, it makes the Student Senate have to address it once it reaches a certain input from the student body. That being said, the student government does view this website before it hits 250. We do enjoy this website. We enjoy participating on it and seeing what students post. And when we see an idea that has a lot of momentum, we pay attention to it. We address ideas before they hit 250 signatures sometimes. And while this is new, we've gotten plenty of ideas for how to continue in student government. That way, when we do something, if we see a petition come up related to it, and then we see that petition gets a lot of momentum, we consider, do we want to include this in what we're doing right now? Do we want to start this as something separate? How do we want to address it? Because we really have to have a plan before it reaches us on the table. So in that way, when it does, or even if before it does, we can say, we see that this is an interest in students. We want to see this continued further. Here's how we can help you. You can do it with these resources. We can do it with these people. And we want to make sure that this idea does not fall short and eventually go into some legislative hole where it can't be found. It's really making sure that students are accountable for what their ideas are and making sure the Senate is accountable for it as well.
Thank you.
I think the role of the petitions website is very important. It allows us to really get the input from the student body. What is the student body thinking right now? I've said that I want to go around to different groups and talk to them face to face and figure out what they're thinking. What do they want the Senate to work on? But I can't reach every single student every single day. And I think the petitions website is one way that we can get the ideas from the student body and say, hey, this is what is on people's minds right now. Why do we want to address this, or why should we address this? And it allows the students to have a platform upon which they can give us ideas and give us projects and task us with things that they want addressed. Again, I think that the best way of communication is through the face-to-face interaction, but this petitions website is the second best thing.
All right, thank you very much. Moving on to the next question. In light of the recent Poly article concerning the alleged defacing of campaign materials in the PU race and the defacing from last year, how do you plan to repair the trust between the student body and the student government? And we'll start with Marcus.
As I've said before, students working in student government is the best thing that we have. It allows students to see how we operate before, during, and after the campaign season. I believe that when students see that and they see that what we do is what we do because we're passionate about it and because we care about the results and we care about helping the RPI community, I believe that that's when we can make the most trust with students. That's when we can go up to freshmen and say that we want to do this when they come on campus, and we ask them if they're interested, and they have people, that say, I heard about this. This is interesting. And I believe that really having that casual ability to talk about what we do is the most important form of trust, and not worrying about whether or not what we're doing is something different behind closed doors, because we want to make sure that students know that those doors are open. And I want to make sure that student voice is not tampered with in any way, and that we can get the best communication with our bodies as possible.
Thank you. Michael?
I want to start by saying that I was not involved in any of the events that happened on Monday night, but I think the most important thing to recognize is that even though maybe the reputation of student government may have been hurt through the events that happened last year and maybe this year, I think that the way we can quickly resolve this is by working on projects that the students care about. Because ultimately we're the voice of the student body, as I've maintained multiple times. And the best way to get things done with administration is, I believe, is through the Student Senate. We have relationships with different administrators, with different people on campus, and I think we can advocate for the students through our Senate work, and I believe that the Senate is the best way to do that. So the most important thing to recognize is that we're going to continue to work for you guys. We're going to continue to advocate for your rights, work on projects that you care about, make campus a better place to live and learn. But it all comes down to the students and what they want to see.
All right, thank you very much. The next few questions are candidate specific. First question is Marcus. Your platform touches on a variety of different issues. Do you feel you'll be able to accomplish all these goals during your limited time as GM?
To answer that, the answer is yes and no. I believe that there are a lot of things that I can accomplish in my year as Grand Marshal. That being said, there are a lot of things on there that I fully understand are long-term projects and will not be completed within a year. What's important is to make sure that they have the foundation and the right conversations are started, because until those conversations are started, the projects will absolutely not happen. Making sure that I open the door for those projects to continue further and then successfully be completed is the most important thing, I think, and that's what I want to do as Grand Marshal. And when it comes to the variety of things I'd like to accomplish, that's why I'm not working alone. The Grand Marshal does not work alone in student government. The Grand Marshal has the committees that work below him in Student Senate with passionate leaders and passionate students involved, and that's not even before we start counting the senators that are involved, because the people in leadership in student government don't have to be senators. They don't have to be elected. They just have to be students that are willing to say, I want to do this, will you help me? And so I believe that when you have that wide variety of students who really care about their specific areas, it makes it easy as the Grand Marshal to really go out and say that I want to address this, I want to address this. Because if someone tells you that they want this addressed, there's going to be another person next to them that says, I'm passionate about this too, and I want to address it here, I'd like to join your team. And that's what I think is the most important thing, is to get the people on our team that are really passionate about it, and then explain to other students how we operate, so in that way there can be a feeling of trust, acceptance, and progress.
Thank you very much. And now a question for Michael. You mentioned a desire to revitalize the union's role in the Troy community and to enhance the student experience in the region, but don't give many specifics. How do you plan to do this, and what does this necessarily entail?
I think this comes down to our community relations committee, which we had this past year, which again was not successful in their goals this year. So I think the most important thing is to interface with the different organizations that are in the city of Troy, like the service organizations, like the orphanages, food, soup kitchens, sorry, anything that a philanthropic club or organization, including fraternities, sororities, that are looking for opportunities to give back to our community is, I think, the most important thing. We need to identify where those are and how we can interact with these different groups. As Marcus has said, I think it's also important to recognize how to interact with different schools in the area as well. There's a lot of events that go on with Russell Sage College and RPI as a joint venture, but not many students hear about it. And I think the most important thing is to get the word out, because they do put in time to organize these events. The only reason I know about these events is because one of my fraternity brothers is dating a Russell Sage student, but that shouldn't be the only way that I hear about these events that are going on.
All right, thank you very much. The next question is for Marcus. Part of your platform is about increasing intercollegiate student interaction. Can you give a little more specific details about this, and when will the student body see tangible results?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch what type of interactions you said.
Intercollegiate, so between colleges.
So a detailed plan of what I really want to accomplish is making sure, again, that sister and brother organizations between the colleges, first off, know that the other one exists. And then that they can talk about, why did you form this organization at this college? Why did you form this organization at my college? Why did these things happen in the first place? And once we have those ideas lined up, then that really allows us to take the steps forward, saying, we want to do this. It's going to be getting students out to this event over here. Would you be interested in working with us to make sure students are involved, make sure the event's set up, making sure that, if students need to travel to Albany campus for an event, that we work with the union and make sure that, they understand that this is important to us as it is important to Albany students as well. Making sure that that communication happens between both groups is the first step. So that starts with contacting people, making sure you have an idea for events. An event that I'd like to see is something that expands the cultural awareness on all the campuses, making sure that students in multicultural groups understand that there are organizations nearby that are willing to work with them, that are willing to open themselves up. I know that for myself, with my fraternity, there are events that we put on between both of our chapters, and it really just starts with us communicating, going out to support one another, and making sure that we understand that what we want to accomplish is not unique to our environment at RPI.
All right, thank you very much. This question is for Michael. You mentioned a desire to release public updates about Senate projects. What means would you take to inform the students about these updates and receive their feedback?
So this is all about releasing our documents or proposals throughout the process, because there shouldn't be any secrets between us and the students when it comes to working on our proposals. What we do kind of right now is once the Senate approves a document, then it becomes public, and then it becomes Senate approved. And I don't think that necessarily needs to be the case. We can release working documents, let students know what we are working on and how we're approaching this topic. And the way I want to do that is through our new student government website. Once our Senate worked very hard to get that up and running right now. But I think using that website is the best form, because it allows for a central location where you can find everything student government related. But not only that, I do plan on publicizing on Facebook, on Twitter, on Reddit, on all the different social media platforms so that students can hear about it. But ultimately, it's all about where are you going to find this information? How do you find it? What kind of information do you want to find? And all of those can be found based on these working documents throughout the process.
Okay, thank you. And then a question from the audience for Michael. You said one of your main goals is to appoint committee chairs with a plan, but you also say that you want the Senate to work on projects that the students bring up. How do you reconcile these two goals?
So I think the important thing is, but what I mean by committee chairs that have a plan is having a plan for leadership. How do they want to organize their committee? How do they want to find the projects that they want to work on? Is it going to be through brainstorming? Is it going to be from the petitions website? Are they going to be the ones that are going around to the different groups? I want to identify that so I can choose the best committee chairs that I can find. I think to address the point about finding the projects that we want to work on, obviously, I want to go with that face-to-face interaction, but I can't do all the work myself. I need to use my committee chairs and work with them and find the best solutions by interacting with the student body and working with those different groups and going out to those different groups because 5 people are better than 1.
Thank you very much. And I have one question for both candidates here. If not elected, how do you plan to remain involved in student government, and how would you help them to succeed? And we'll start with Marcus.
If I'm not elected to be Grand Marshal, I would still be involved with student government as I have been for the past 3 years, and that focuses on academics. Not being Grand Marshal would limit me to focusing relatively on one project area, maybe 2, but I wouldn't have the ability to really have the conversations that need to happen. But if not elected, I would work on academics. I would work on making sure that we have a comfortable learning environment here, because that's the most important thing. That's what allows you to live your life at RPI as free as you can. And so making sure that the faculty understand that the Faculty Senate is new. They're a new organization that we're working with, and so the communications with them, while having been opened up recently, it really allows us the chance to set the groundwork for how we want to operate. Make sure that, when we're communicating with them, we want to make sure that we're giving them all the information about what we're doing. That's what we've done. And in the future, make sure that communication is received back. And so if not elected Grand Marshal, I would make sure that that communication goes to the student body, goes to student government, and really that we can have the most comfortable experience here that we can.
Thank you very much. Michael?
So this year I've worked on the Facilities and Services Committee to really work on those tangible products and tangible projects. If not elected, I would want to continue doing those through my committee because a lot of what we've done has come to completions, but some of the projects are long-standing. We have a lot of, for example, we have a Green Revolving Fund project which works on sustainable projects that save the school money, and that money goes back into the fund so that it can fund other projects. And what we want to do right now is start with a few seed projects and see where the successes are and have a track record of success. Right now, we only have one proposal that has been successfully funded and is going to go out there, but we have 2 more in the works, and I want to see that work continued into the next term. So that's why I want to be the Facilities and Services Committee Chair next year. But ultimately, I want to keep working on those projects that still have those tangible means, still have those tangible outcomes.
Thank you very much. So with that question, that will conclude the question and answer period, and I'd like to give you both 2 minutes or so for a closing statement, and we can start with Marcus for that.
I believe that I am the best choice to become Grand Marshal this year because I've explored new areas through the Academic Affairs Committee. I've taken ideas that were not tangible before, and I've made them into something that not only students can understand, not only student government can understand, but the faculty and the administration have taken interest in. I've taken ideas that came from us and made it a focus for both sides, made sure it's something that everyone can invest in and something that everyone is happy to have accomplishments with. I want to make sure that that passion that I have is shared by everyone who works on their specific area. I want to make sure that everyone who is working in student government understands that they're not alone, that there are students on campus who would feel the same way as them, and that those students can be enlisted to help work with them and make sure that students understand not only what's going on, what they can accomplish, but how student government works. Because when we have a better idea of how we operate and students understand how we operate, I think that's when we'll reach the point where when student initiatives come up, we can really say we all want to work on that and we can make RPI the best place that it can be for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Michael?
I want to be Grand Marshal because I care deeply about this school. I love RPI. I've been in student government for 3 years, but that's not the only thing I've been involved in. I'm a member of a fraternity. I give tours for the admissions department. I'm also involved in academics. I'm a programming mentor for Intro to Algorithms this semester, and I've also been a math mentor for Calculus 1. So I have all this background. I know how this campus works. I know what students are thinking, but I think the most important thing is how do we get to the next step? How do we figure out what the Senate needs to do? How do we get the Senate to operate at its maximum capacity? And I believe I have the ideas to get that going. I have the track record of success so that you know that if elected, that I can get the job done and finish our long-term projects and introduce more projects that can bring tangible change to our campus. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So with closing statements being over, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight. I'd like to thank our 2 candidates for being here. And I hope best of luck to the both of you. And hopefully everyone votes tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi everybody. I'm Paulie Laurie, the chair of the Senate's Rules and Elections Committee, and I have two announcements to make right now, the one you guys want to hear and the one you probably don't care about, so I'm making the second one first. Currently at the back table where a bunch of people are hunched over and Josh in the green polo is waving, we are testing out, letting people try out the electronic voting system you are going to use tomorrow for the first time to vote electronically for GM week. So, if you want to see what it's like to just swipe your ID card and click and then get a mug, except for without the getting a mug part, you can do that. And now the less fun part. So, I'm assuming you guys all know what I'm about to say since you have access to the internet. So I'm just gonna get into this. The Rules and Elections Committee reached one discussion today after some evidence was brought to us by members of the union, and subsequently, after discussion, decided to release Sanction 8, which was approved by a vote of 5 for, 0 against, with 1 abstention. The following is the wording of Sanction 8. In light of evidence which was brought to the Rules and Elections Committee by members of the union, based on what was done by candidates in the video, taking into account that another candidate's campaign material was partially removed, the following candidates are in violation of the Grand Marshal Week 2015 handbook and cannot be actively campaigned for, and cannot post any new campaign material effectively immediately at the issue of this decision. Andrew Sedano, Sean Walowick, Sean, I don't freaking know how to say your last name, sorry about that. Kayla Cinnamon, and Steven Sprazza. Further, the party, a stronger union, may not actively campaign as a party following the issuing of this decision. Now to move on with the debates you were expecting, presented by Varun Rao of RPI's Debate Club. Peace out.
Hello? Okay. Okay, you guys can hear me? All right, cool. All right. If we can have the PU candidates come up. All right, welcome all to the President of the Union debate. For audience members, you are able to ask questions actually to the candidates, and I will deliver it to them. All you have to do is raise your hand, and our lovely staffer Aiden will come and pick them up, or give you paper, and then later, if you raise your hand again, he'll get them up to me. So just raise your hand, and that's all I got to do. All right, so let's get to it then, shall we? My first question will be to Mr. Sedano, and it's, in light of the recent Poly article, and I really have no choice but to be blunt here, about posters, what exactly happened, what was your role in it, and could you just explain what it was about?
First, I'd like to start by thanking the Debate Club for hosting the event, and thank you everyone who came. It's a great pleasure to be able to sit in front of you, and it's a great pleasure to be here with an opponent like Greg. So again, I thank you. I'd like to answer your question. It's going to seem very indirect. I'm going to say I'm getting the information as you are, and that's the farthest and the most that I will comment on the matter.
Okay, so you can't tell us anything else about your role?
Everything that I know and that is coming on will be released and will be constantly released by Rules and Elections Committee, and I would like to leave it at that.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, so let's start out with the first question to both of you. I'd like to have Greg answer first, then Andrew, and we'll switch off throughout the debate. And I'd like to remind you guys, you can respond to each other's points, but keep it short. So let's start. First question, what does being PU mean to you? Why are you running for PU and not trying to become representative on the executive board?
Being president of the union, to me, means representing the interests of all students of RPI, all the members of the Rensselaer Union. And I believe that the president is the one who directs the e-board, and the e-board sets all the policies in place to make sure that students can do the things that they want to do to the best of their ability. And the purpose of the union is to simply foster that creativity and spirit in the members of the union. The president facilitates that.
Andrew?
Yes, so this past year, I served on the Rensselaer Union Executive Board. There I was able to see the true potential that lies in the Rensselaer Union. And I'm going to emphasize here the Rensselaer Student Union and what it means to be a student union. And as I talk to people, I see a lot of times people kind of getting away from that. They don't necessarily know about the fact that it's a student union. As president of the union, I believe that I can truly bring back that idea that this is a student union for the students, by the students. And so I'm running to truly round out the union to make this a truly student place for where everyone is welcome and we can foster ideas, creativity, and initiatives.
Okay, thank you. Those first questions to Andrew. What time commitments do you have? How focused will you be on just being president of the union?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
What time commitments do you have? How focused will you be on just being president of the union?
Of course. So I'll start by saying what I did this past year. I was the news editor of the Rensselaer Polytechnic. I was on the rugby team. I'm a Physics 2 teaching assistant. I was a SIPC mentor. I'm a brother at Zeta Psi. But with all these commitments that I've had, I can tell you that none of them will carry through into my term in office. Understanding how important the office and the position of President of the Union is, I will be releasing all my offices that I currently hold, any positions that I have in other clubs, to make sure that I focus 100% of my time to this office and to this position.
Greg?
The question is regarding my time commitments?
Yes.
Well, I'm currently business manager at WRPI. I have been for 2 years, and I've spoken to the other members of the executive committee, and I will be ending my tenure as business manager at the end of this election. If I win, I will be releasing it immediately. If I lose, I will continue the remainder of my term and then seek other positions within the club or student government. I believe that time commitment to the position is not really an issue. I will go at it head on and devote all my time and spirit to it.
What are some challenges you have faced in the past? How do you overcome these challenges? Greg, if you can answer this first.
Challenges. There are a lot of challenges. Being a student leader, running an organization. The position I held at WRPI extends simply beyond being business manager, making financial decisions. It's about working with people, making the right decisions for the club, both now and in the future, and I believe that all these skills are going to carry into being president of the union. There's always challenges. No club is ever going to have enough money. You could always want more. You need to learn to do more with less, to prioritize funds, to make sure that you're doing things the best way. And I believe that my time at WRPI has given me the skills I need to prioritize, to make these commitments, and solve these challenges.
Andrew?
So I'm going to say that as a student at RPI, I believe we've all faced our fair share of challenges, be it the classroom, via extracurriculars, or be it our social life. However, I'm going to touch on the issues that I face as an executive board representative. And being human and being a member of the union has been kind of the toughest things. And that's telling a club objectively that you necessarily can't give them something, and how tough that opportunity is and how tough it is to face that reality. Through my term in office as the executive board representative, I've had to deal with working with clubs extensively, and I've had to deal with objectively telling them that this is something that's going to be tough to get. It's going to be something that we're really going to have to work for, and that's something that I'm going to be there on the front lines with them, making sure that I can try my best to get it, but that it's not necessarily something that I can give them. And it's kind of that dialogue that is very difficult to kind of present to the student body and tell people how tough it is to tell someone that they may not be necessarily able to get what they want.
Okay. What is something new that you feel that you can bring to this position that is different than what has been done in the past or is currently being done? And Andrew, if you can answer this first.
Okay. So this past year, I served as the news editor of the Rensselaer Polytechnic. My sole goal in the Rensselaer Polytechnic was to be as transparent as possible, was to tell the student body the information was there. I had brought the executive board, I brought that to the Rensselaer Polytechnic in an article form to kind of show off some of what was happening there. I plan on taking this to the next level by utilizing this experience that I've had as the news editor of the Rensselaer Polytechnic to bring it to a new level of transparency, to ultimately show all of the students what's going on in the executive board, via the social media platforms of the 21st century, stuff like Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or other forms of social media not yet found. I also plan on holding live seminar updates online and posting pending and live decisions so that students can weigh in and voice their concerns and potentially disagree with an opinion or say they don't personally feel one way or another. By doing so, my executive board representatives will be able to make a much more educated and much more sound, holistic vote instead of something that they're just coming up with on the spot through their own reason.
Greg?
I apologize, but you're going to have to repeat the question.
What is something new that you feel that you can bring to this position that is different than what has been done in the past or what's currently being done?
Well, it's a little bit different because I've never been on the Student Senate. I've never been on the e-board. I've simply been a student. I've been a club officer. I've learned the leadership skills that I need, but the exact policies of the union are a little bit different. I believe I can learn all of these, but there are a lot of things that people seem to do year after year, even if it doesn't work or if it's not the right thing to do. I want to make sure that we look at every process, we consider if this is the right thing to do, and not simply do it because that's how people have done it in the past. I bring this new perspective, one that represents the student body as a whole, instead of what the current student government believes the needs of the students are. And I believe that this outside experience brings some fresh perspective to the Rensselaer Union.
The first one to answer will be Greg. What are some specific goals that you wish to accomplish as PU?
I want to make sure that the student union is responsible to the students and the members of the union. One of the biggest ways I want to do this is to create a separate group under the authority of the executive board, specifically to target club appeals. The process as it currently stands is a club submits its budget for the year. Some line items get approved, they get funding, some of them get cut a little bit, and some of them get denied entirely. And if your club gets cut some necessary operating funds, you have to appeal it back to the e-board, which is the same group that denied it in the first place. I want to make sure that there's a separate appeals board that handles the appeals so that there's a fresh pair of eyes looking over every budget and making sure no one is being unfairly denied funds.
Yeah, you can.
I'd like to respond to some misinformation that was just stated. You said that the whole executive board does the budgeting, and that's not necessarily true. When we do go into the budgeting process, this is a multi-day event, and we split up into many little groups of 2 to 3 people, depending on the club, genre, or specific event. Therefore, when you appeal, you actually bring it in front of the whole board, the board that not necessarily made that decision so that everyone can objectively look at it, and everyone there has the experience and know-how to kind of make sure they understand the situation and they've worked with that situation in the past. To further on, I believe your question was what goals I had?
Specific goals that you wish to accomplish.
Okay. So this year, I want to bring a stronger student voice to the Rensselaer Union Executive Board. I want to create an atmosphere of student creativity and initiative. To bring a stronger student voice to the executive board, I believe we have to make our executive board representatives attend the general body meetings for the clubs they represent. In doing so, they're not just a name on the end of an email, or if you get to it, a voice on the end of a phone call, but instead a face, a person, someone they can go to and relate to. In terms of creating an environment of student creativity and initiative, I plan on creating a spring activity fair. This activity fair is going to be very different. It's going to be focused around student ideas, events, your initiatives, to help promote it, to garner support from the Greek community, from the different academic departments, from the institute at large, or the student senate, or the executive board. In doing so, we'll be able to see what real potential lies and really move that forward. I also want to create an alumni donation website. In doing so, we'll be able to start giving back to the students of Rensselaer. In this hope, we'll be able to offer more services, but not have to tax you and expect you to pay at the same rates that you are. In the long run, I want to be able to give you more, but ultimately decrease the activity fee.
Okay, next comes
Can
some
I
questions
comment on that?
from the
I'm
students.
sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
I want to respond to one of those things. Specifically, an alumni donation website to fund the union seems a little ridiculous that we have to rely on our alumni in order to cover the basic operating expenses of the union. And if we're collecting the student activity fee anyway, why should we be pressuring alumni into donating for us?
As I speak to alumni, a lot of them say, I'm not necessarily happy with how the Institute at Large is going, but I'd love to donate to the students of RPI. I'd love to give to student initiatives. We would be pressuring no one. We would just be offering a different venue to help the students of RPI kind of gain this different perspective. We would be expecting nothing of them, just trying to gain their support and their help for the Rensselaer Union and for student ideas, creativity, and initiative. This is just something added on that they'll have the option to use and to utilize to help all the students of RPI.
Okay, I'd like to add, I think it's good to have response. Let's not have too many responses, two responses, and let's keep them short as well. And next to me, some student questions from the audience. First one is, what do you view as the next steps of the union going forward? Where's the union student government succeeded? Where must it improve? I'd like you to start first, Andrew.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
What do you view as the next steps for the union going forward? Where is the union student government succeeded? Where must it improve?
So there are a couple aspects to this that I'd like to break apart, whether it's the executive board and the student senate. Personally, I felt the student senate did a great job getting information out there and allowing for students to know what's going on, where the executive board may not have done as great of a job. Therefore, there's a lot of room for improvement moving on to the 21st century that we're in, and there are these different tools that we need to start utilizing, such as Facebook, Reddit, Twitter, and we need to start getting on there and making sure that we have a presence, making sure that people know what we're doing. As students of RPI, I feel that everyone has an inherent right to know what's going on in the Rensselaer Student Union. You have a right to know where your money's going, you have a right to know where your resources are going, and you have a right to know what's happening. Therefore, I want to make sure that you understand that, and then you can accurately say, hey, this is where my money's being spent. This is where these resources are going. This is where X club is getting Y, or this is why A club is using B. And then we can all come together and say this is a student union, run by the students, led by the students, for the students.
Greg?
I believe my opponent raises some good points. Communication with students is important, and I believe, to extend on that, that the current culture toward students in student government is very negative, and that there is a lack of trust between the students and the student government. As a person who has never been involved with student government before, trying to run for a position like the president of the union, I've met with very heavy-handed criticism of people that believe that I couldn't do it simply because I've never done it before, and I feel like the general culture has been very negative. There are, of course, exceptions, and there are many people in student government that have been very welcoming, but many people haven't. And I want to make sure that the student government is about the students. We can't just tell them what we're doing as student leaders. We have to make sure that we're listening to student opinions, taking them into account, and allowing students to make the decisions themselves. I want to make sure that I'm holding regular town hall meetings, both in person and online, so everybody can make it, where I can give them the information that we're going to use to make decisions, and students can give feedback before decisions have to be made, instead of after. I feel like we can continue to rebuild this trust that we have with students that is disappearing in recent times.
Okay, this next question is another student question, and this is only for Sedano. How do you feel you can regain the trust of RPI students as PU?
Yes. So there's a specific way that I want to gain the trust, and that's, I don't want this dialogue to end here. As I go around to clubs, Greek houses, etc., I believe that we are able to see a different approach. We're able to answer unique questions and that their perspective. So what I want to do is, if elected, is continue this conversation, continue going around and saying, what do you want? Being held accountable to the students of RPI, being held accountable to these different groups, these clubs, these Greek houses, to different halls, making sure that we're noticeable and we're there on campus, to make sure everyone can see us and hold us accountable, to make sure that we are doing our job to the best of our ability.
Do you believe you're currently taking student voices into account? Are you listening to everybody's opinions?
Go ahead, answer, yeah.
I do. Having served on the executive board this year, I had spoken to many students, many clubs, and many different organizations, and they were very adamant in certain perspectives, and I was able to tell them fairly, this is something we can do or this is something we can't. I was able to have very open and candid conversations, and not just be a yes man, but to be someone with realistic goals and to tell them this is how you need to get stuff done, and this is what we can do for you so that we together can be the best we can.
Any other rebuttals to that, or are you done? Okay. Next question. How would you encourage club growth and formation? I'm going to start this off with Greg.
Club growth is extraordinarily important to me, being a soon-to-be former club officer. Club growth is really going to be driven by letting clubs do the things that they want to do. I am a strong believer in the if you build it, they will come approach. If we fund clubs, give student clubs the autonomy to do the projects they want to do, we have extremely talented people here at RPI. They will do the things that they want to do, and they will do it well. The people that are involved in the club will tell their friends, hey, we do really cool things at Club XYZ, you should come to our meeting on Wednesday. People are going to come to that, and there's a whole list of clubs online on the Rensselaer Union website, so that even if you don't know anybody in an interest field, you can just search for it, and then you go to one of their meetings, you see they're doing the things that they want to do, the things that you want to do, and I believe that members are going to find clubs pretty easily.
There you state a lot of things that are already done. All those actually already happen with the new Rensselaer Union website. A lot of those happen because we do fund clubs. We do try to promote them. That's not unique. Do you have any unique ideas that you want to bring to help clubs promote themselves?
Once again, I believe that if we fund clubs appropriately, if we make sure that they have the resources to do the things that they want to do, they will be able to promote themselves. I don't intend to say that the union website with the list of clubs does not exist. I'm stating that as a thing that is currently in place. If you go to union.rpi.edu, you'll find it. So.
Would you respond to the question, Andrew?
Yes. So there's a very unique part of my platform that addresses this, and that's the Spring Activities Fair. Right now, I don't believe that students and clubs are able to show off their ideas as much as they would like to. So in the Spring Activity Fair, it's going to be different. It's going to be a place where they can come and promote themselves and their ideas that they created. These projects, these unique ideas they have to kind of better themselves, show off what they've done. If Embedded Hardware Club has created a new robot, I want to create an event where they can show the student body, this is what we did. Come help us out. Come look at it. This is awesome. So that they can grow themselves, they can start garnering support, and they can be an ultimately better club than they already are.
Okay, now this question is from an audience member, and it's directly for Greg. It states, you have brought up throughout your campaign the importance of clubs at RPI while not speaking in much detail regarding other parts of the union, like athletics, facilities, businesses, and administration. Can you expand on your thoughts on other aspects of the union?
Yes. I'll admit that the large majority of my platform is directed towards clubs because that's where my experience lies. That's what I want to improve the most. That doesn't mean I'm completely disregarding everything else that the union does. I'm constantly meeting with people in the student government to learn about these other aspects that maybe I'm not so familiar with and try to brush up my knowledge on areas where I'm not so clear. I'm meeting with the current GM and PU regularly. I've met with the director of the union, Joe Cassidy, to learn about the financial side of things, how much money goes in, how much goes out, where the money goes. And I believe that these other aspects of the union are extremely important simply because students use them, and that makes them important, sort of tautologically, and that sort of thing needs to be funded. It's simply just not where my expertise lies.
Thank you. Next question is, how would you address preliminary budgets of newly formed clubs? What determines how much money a newly formed club receives? I'd like Greg to start this off.
This is for me?
Yeah, for both of you, but could you start
Okay.
answering?
Well, preliminary budgets and how they're decided, yes.
Excuse me?
That was the question?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. I'm sorry, just my mind is in another place right now. Preliminary budgets are, of course, extremely important, and I believe that the best way to make sure that they're good, that they represent the clubs, is to make sure we have e-board representatives that are constantly meeting in contact with their club. It's the privilege of the president of the union to appoint the members of his or her e-board, or at least most of them. There's a couple council representatives, as I'm sure my opponent will bring up. And if those people are instead nominated by the club officers, if they say, hey, we think Joe is a great guy, he's been with our club for years, then we can look at that person as someone who's very involved in the club, they're passionate about it, and they understand the needs, and they'll be able to put together a preliminary budget that very accurately represents the needs of the club. How exactly to divide the money up is a little bit trickier. There's a limited pool of money. We can't fund every club to the fullest extent. But we have to look at what are their operating costs, what do they need to survive, how active is membership, how many members do they have, what do they really need to expand to the next level, to do something that they aren't doing now that members would like to. And if we take all these things into consideration, I believe that we can adequately distribute the amount of money we have to the various clubs in a proportionate fashion.
Andrew?
So this year, we had a couple clubs come before us asking for funding. We had looked at them very objectively. We say, hey, what do you feel you need? What do you feel is the best amount of money you need to become a successful organization? The key to this conversation is communication. We need to have fair and accurate communication between both the club, the executive board rep, and the president of the union to make sure that everyone's on the same page and on the same dialogue. Therefore, we can accurately say, what do you need to become successful? What do you need to be the best that you can be? And then we can accurately and fairly give them the funding that they deserve as a Rensselaer Union club. Personally, and I try to make this very adamant, I believe that all organizations, all students, and all clubs deserve the same resources, opportunities, money that every other club does. I think there can be no preferability towards new clubs, towards no clubs, because everyone has the same right to the money, to the facilities, and to the services that we offer as a whole. Therefore, I would personally look at them like I would any other club, to make sure that they're looked at in a fair manner, not as just a new startup club, but as a regular organization that falls under the Rensselaer Student Union.
What do you say about clubs that need extra funds in order to get started, say to purchase new equipment or something similar?
I would say that carries over the same way. That still stands, that that's what they need to become a very successful organization. Therefore, if they need specific funds to become more successful, or if they require an added budget, that's something that we have to look at. We have to say, that's fair, that is what you need to be the best you can be, to be a great venue for the students of RPI, and ultimately allow for a much more diverse student union.
Okay, now this question is directly for Greg. Do you think you're qualified for this position without any prior experience in student government?
Yes, I do. The position is not about spending your time on the e-board, you pay your dues, and then you get to be president of the union. It's about being the right leader for the student body and the members of the Rensselaer Union. I've been an executive officer of WRPI. I've been business manager. I've learned the financial side of things. I've learned how to manage people. I spent all 4 years of high school in debate. I went on to become a national semi-finalist in congressional debate. I have leadership experience. The fact that I have not been a member of the executive board or that I have not served on the Senate is completely irrelevant. Policy and procedure can be learned. Honor, integrity, and leadership skills can only be gained through experience, but that experience doesn't really matter whether you got it through student government or through student activities.
To respond to that, Greg, if I remember correctly, you have only been to one executive board meeting. You've been running an office and you posted back in January, and our executive board meetings are open. If you did want to garner this experience, why would you not come to an executive board meeting? Start learning the process so you didn't have a learning gap that the students would have to face and be dealt with if elected, but instead something where you can hit the ground running. And if I also remember correctly, you came to that meeting primarily to complain about the process, not actually to help solve the solution.
Give me just a second here.
Don't make the questions too long, Andrew. Let's a little bit shorten them.
It's a lot of different parts to a difficult question to answer. The fact that I've been to e-board meetings is kind of irrelevant here. I believe the fact is the policies and procedures can be learned. I've been meeting to learn about the union as a whole to get the higher level picture, and then the details can be learned on the job. I believe that the fact that I came to the meeting to discuss an issue, I think that to dismiss my complaints as complaints, I simply raised issues about the way that the e-board was operating, is exactly the same reason why I'm here in front of you today. I believe that there are things that need to be changed in order to bring positive improvements to the union, and that someone who's content with the current system is never going to change anything for the better. We need fresh, new ideas in order to try things that haven't been done before, in order to potentially have any chance of improving the union. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. It's not, okay. Now this question comes directly from the audience. Why do you think you have leadership qualities superior to your opponents? We start off with Andrew.
That's me, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to start back in high school. I served as a two-sport captain. I led many philanthropic organizations to be successful, and that was just before college. When I hit college, I played on the varsity football team last year. Due to a concussion injury, I was not able to continue playing, but I have that added experience and leadership experience. I then went on to serve as the news editor for the Rensselaer Polytechnic. I served as a SIPSI mentor, leading groups to help promote the STEM scholars. I served as a Physics 2 teaching assistant, aiding in the discussion of the Physics 2 classroom, which, as many of you could probably say, can be difficult at times. I was able to lead over these organizations and groups and bring that to the executive board, which I served on this year. There, I was able to truly learn what it means to become a leader and what it means to really work with these different organizations on campus. Therefore, through this vast array of experience, I truly believe I bring a different leadership style that may not necessarily be met everywhere, because I've been from many organizations on campus in a very well-rounded approach.
Right. Greg?
Why I believe my leadership abilities are better than my opponents?
Yes.
Well, simply put, I've learned how to manage people. I've learned how to listen to other people's needs, to take them into consideration, to listen to all sides of an argument, and to not make a decision before we know exactly what's going on. Like I said, I was a debater in high school. I did several different types. The one I did the best at was congressional debate. Went on to be national semifinalist, which I don't like to toot my own horn, but I think it's kind of cool. And now I've been business manager for WRPI since I was a freshman. You know, we do our elections in December. That means that between August to December, they decided that this kid that we've never seen before is good enough to be the business manager of a club with a 5-figure budget. I believe that that shows tremendous faith that they put in me, and I think if you ask any member of the WRPI Executive Board, they will tell you that I have done extremely well, as evidenced by the fact that half of them are in front of me right now. Thank you.
Okay, the next question is directly to Greg. And Andrew, if you actually want to answer this too, it would be also good. It states that you've said that you want to cut down administrative costs. Could you elaborate on what exactly you'd like to cut?
In particular, the administrative costs that I believe that this question is regarding, as asked on my Reddit AMA, which you're welcome to check out yourself, was regarding administrative expenses to do jobs that students are happy to do for free. I think we can all agree that RPI TV right now is doing a great job recording and presenting this experience to you. So to have outside photographers come in for sports games or outside videographers to pay hundreds to maybe thousands of dollars for that when we have excellent talented students doing so for free is outlandish. If we can cut that out, I believe we can save a little bit of money and give students valuable experience.
If you'd like to answer that too, yeah.
I would actually like to disagree. So yes, we have clubs and services on campus that are excellent. They do a phenomenal job doing what they can. But the thing about the Rensselaer Union and what the students of RPI deserve is dependability and reliability. And what these paid for photographers and these different people aspect is something that we can call upon at all hours of the day and not necessarily have to wait around for or hope they get back to us in an email, but instead for someone who's there for us to kind of help bring a more holistic approach, to work the services of the Rathskeller, to work the services of the McNeil Room and these different places to actually offer services all day round, but that may not fit onto a normal schedule. However, I would like to elaborate on what you said about cutting administrative budgets. This is a very dark and kind of murky road, but I do believe it needs to be reanalyzed and relooked at. And I believe through creating an activity fee task force, which I want to reanalyze the distribution of funds, we'll be able to accurately judge where the money's being spent, how it's being spent, and if it's fairly being spent. Thank you.
Now, you mentioned that you want to bring student opinions and voices into the union, but at the same time you're saying that students aren't qualified to do these jobs. How can those two positions coexist?
I completely disagree. I did not say they weren't qualified. What I said is that we need sometimes reliability. We need people who are there for us and who can be there on any time possible. Therefore, that's just what they offer instead of a student organization or group. However, we love to use as many student organizations, as many student services as possible. That's just the only differ. I believe that all the students at RPI are very much qualified, if not overqualified, for a lot of the jobs they are doing. I just believe in some stances there needs to be kind of that break so that we can both have dependability, reliability, and allow the students to have a life outside of the Rensselaer Union.
How does it work that we can't have the student union depending on students? I believe students are just as reliable as any outside vendor.
Well, let me pose a question. If we were to hire a photographer for this event, and we needed them to kind of take photos to kind of document what's happening, and then we were to use a club, and the club was, something was to go wrong, someone was not to get here, and we didn't have those photos. I think that would be unjust to the students of RPI and to everyone around. So instead, we can utilize those services through a hired photographer to kind of bring that different approach and that kind of more well-rounded, what a hired officer and what a hired photographer could do instead of what a student could.
All right, thank you. My next question is, what are some improvements you would make to the union's annual report? And if you could start it off, Andrew.
Yes, so this has been a hot topic. When the union annual report kind of got leaked for all intents and purposes, I jumped on the bandwagon to make sure that the union annual report was dealt with in a very fair and well manner to kind of offer my support to that organization and that group. What I would do differently is start releasing preliminary documents of the UAR. I believe that, as I said, all students have the right to the information as it comes out. Therefore, I want to give students that. I want to be able to give them these preliminary documents as they come out, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 different documents of the UAR, so they can see what's happening and the progression, but make sure they know that their input, their ideas, they're still welcome. We still encourage them to give back and give their ideas to us.
Greg?
I hate to just say I agree, but that's essentially my plan as well. I think that if we give students access to every draft of the document, we make sure that they're involved at every step of the process, like in my town hall meetings that I mentioned. They can provide their own feedback, we can work it in, and there's no surprises when the end document comes out.
Okay, my next question is just for Andrew, and it's in your platform you state that you want to make all e-board projects public. Why do you believe this is good policy? Shouldn't some things be kept secret, at least regarding the e-board?
In terms of projects and stuff like that, no. This is a student union. You have the right. You have the right. You have the right to know what's going on, what we're doing in terms of our committee projects, and where the direction of the union is. I believe that no student can be held in the gray, can be under a shadow of the mystery that's happening in the executive board, especially as it pertains to the Rensselaer Union projects and ideas. So to answer your question, it's just no. All students have a right, being part of the student union, to know what's going on at all times.
Okay, now my next question is just for Greg, and it's your platform mentions that you would like to have town hall meetings. Could
Yes.
you elaborate on what these are and what makes you think these will be effective?
Sure. The idea of a town hall meeting is that we take some space. I've heard rumors that it would be in the McNeil room. I don't know where that come from because I've never said that. But we would find a space large enough to accommodate a group of reasonable size. And I and members of the executive board would come in and present, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it, this is why we're doing it, this is where we're going in the future. And more importantly, students will be able to stand up, ask questions, give comment, provide input on where they want us to go. Why haven't we done this? Why haven't you taken my views into consideration? You know, here's where we want to direct the e-board, because it is the student union. We're presiding over the group in order to run it, but we still follow the instructions given by the student body. The question on if these town hall meetings would be effective is kind of beside the point. It's not about any particular one mode of communication. It's not saying, you know, everybody come to the town hall meeting or I'm not going to listen to you. Of course I'm going to post on Reddit. Of course I'm going to post on Facebook. I'm going to publish my cell phone number. You can text me or call me in the middle of the night if you want to give me your opinion that way. There will be plenty of ways to voice your opinion. I simply believe that this is one new medium that hasn't been used recently and I feel is worth a shot.
Okay, thank you. My question for both of you is, how would you hold e-board representatives accountable to their clubs, and what's your criteria for selecting e-board representatives? If Greg could start.
Well, as I mentioned, I've decided to waive my privilege to personally select my e-board, and instead I'm going to allow club officers, fraternities, athletic teams, everybody involved in the e-board process to suggest their own representatives who will then be the pool that I pick from. I really believe that this will fill the spots with good people that are deeply involved and passionate about the things that they've been nominated to do, and that this way will produce great people that really don't need a lot of coercion to do their job, because maybe they go to that club or activity anyway, they're already friends with all the leaders. If in the off chance someone does underperform, I believe that it needs to be brought up as quickly as possible, make it clear that you aren't doing the job that you were assigned to do, and if the need arises, we will replace them.
Andrew?
I'd first like to say, I disagree. I don't believe that we can pick out and choose what clubs have the right to decide what e-board reps go. Say that, no, the one you recommended, no, they're not good enough. Or, hey, Club A, no, not that one. I believe that we need to have an open call. We need to allow for clubs to recommend who they'd like the normal process goes. Allow for Greek organizations, allow for athletics to put people forward in an open pool and openly discuss what possibilities we are. In terms of criteria, I'm looking for people who are very objective, people who can honestly say and look at the different spots in the union and say, why? Ask the question, why? And tell people no. Tell me no. I don't want just yes people on my board. I don't want people who are just going to agree with me, because then it won't be a very holistic and diverse board. But instead it will just be a board made of me for all intents and purposes, and that's what I believe we need to get away from. We need to have people who can think critically and objectively say what they want to say and look at it from a different point of view. So I want a very diverse board made up of many different experiences, have both independents, Greeks, club officers, club representatives, and maybe have people who aren't represented in clubs so that we can get the whole student body represented instead of just specific clubs.
All right, thank you. The next question is from the audience, and it's, do you plan to do anything for RPI professional chapters such as SHPE, NSPE, and SASE, who currently receive no funding from the union and later says professional chapters or clubs at RPI that provide professional development, workshops, and networking opportunities at RPI. So how would you, yeah, and I'd like you to start the question.
Okay. I'd like to re-emphasize the fact that I believe that all organizations on campus do have a right to utilize the resources that the Rensselaer Union offers. This actually question has been brought up to me a couple times during my campaign. And time and time again, I tell them that I believe you have the right to have your day in court. You have the right to go in front of the executive board and state your case. State why you believe that you should get funding. And ultimately, we need to work towards that. Because as an organization on campus that represents the students, you have the right to be given these resources and these fundings like all other organizations and clubs do.
Greg?
I believe that students decide where the money should go for the union. If students are interested in professional organizations, and assuming they follow all of the bylaws that the union sets up, that they should be allowed to have funding like any other club. They should be allowed to say, this is what I'm interested in, I pay union dues, I pay the student activity fee, and that money should go back to the things that they're interested in. To have them not be funded by the union while other clubs are seems disproportionate and a little bit off kilter to me.
Okay, now this question is just for Greg, and it comes from the audience, and it states, you said that you avoided learning the current system of operations to keep yourself as a fresh perspective. How do you plan to change a system you don't know?
I'm sorry, I believe that's a leading question. It sounds like you're saying that I intentionally avoided learning the system to come in as a clean slate, and that's completely not true. I've met with the current GM, the PU, I've met with the E-Board, I've met with the director of the union, and I've tried to learn exactly what goes into the job and how to do it. I can bring fresh perspective in, but I do need to learn the policies and procedures that go into it, how exactly the union operates, how it really works, so to speak. And while I'll admit, I don't know everything right now, but that's one of my strongest things. I can come in with fresh ideas, hear how things are going, and I can say, hey, just because we've done that way in the past doesn't mean we need to continue to do so in the future.
I believe the student body deserves a leader who both knows how to get it done and has the experience and know-how to know the system and how to change it, and has already worked in the system and already knows the solutions and the way to make the system better. Therefore, I don't believe that the student body deserves a learning gap. I don't believe you deserve a break in that knowledge gap, but instead someone who can hit the ground running and knows how to get stuff done immediately, but also brings in that outside perspective. As a freshman, I did not serve on the Rensselaer Union Executive Board. I served on the outside looking in. I looked into the Executive Board. I saw like what's going on there. To be completely honest, I didn't really know. I'm like you. Anybody out here who says, I don't really know what happens in the system. I don't really know what the system is. But then as I got involved with it, I saw from the other side. Therefore, I bring both the perspective of being inside and outside, where I can objectively say what's going on and how we can fix it, instead of having to learn the system.
How many offices is your political party fielding candidates for?
I don't believe that question is pertinent to this debate.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah.
How many offices does a stronger union, Andrew Sedano's political party, field candidates for? Because I believe it is the large majority and that there is no way that he could accurately represent the opinions of people from outside the union if everybody he's involved with is currently inside of it.
Okay, well, I guess this is a question to how I form my party.
Hey, so are you basically asking, how do you think Andrew could accurately represent the student body if everyone who's part of this party already part of student government? Is that accurate?
Yes, or is trying to be in.
Or how
Yes.
I formed my party?
No,
Oh, yeah.
I'm simply asking how many of all the positions available for every ballot, how many positions are you fielding candidates for? There's a member of your party running for that position.
To be completely honest, most of them. But the stronger union party, like the name, is the people who we believe can make a stronger union, who can make for a stronger future. Therefore, I don't really see what the worry is behind how many people we field.
Oh, wait, could you?
Okay.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. How would you, what are your opponent's greatest strengths and weaknesses? And if you could start that off.
Okay. I really appreciate Greg being up here. I really see the worth in what he's doing, and I really admire his passion for kind of trying to change the system. I see that as a big strength and something that I would really appreciate having on the executive board, someone who's looking at it from a different perspective.
Greg?
I believe my opponent's strengths are existent. He has experience in the union. He has opinions that he can voice very well. He knows exactly what's going on in the union right now. Weakness. There's no way I can avoid the elephant in the room. I believe that he has completely violated the trust that I both personally put in him and that we as a student body have put in him. And I don't feel like that trust can be repaired very quickly.
All right. Thank you. Now, this is a question coming from the audience, and it says, current Senate bylaws discourage/ban representatives from voting and discussing for clubs they participate in due to conflict of interest and lack of objectivity. How would your platforms solve for this or keep the status quo?
Yes. So this year, I served on the executive board while being on the Rensselaer Polytechnic. I saw firsthand that this kind of objectivism didn't exist. I wasn't able to accurately differ my opinion from the objective reality. Therefore, I see the value in this. I see the value in not having an executive board representative who's on the club, but maybe having someone who's close to the situation, who's able to really know what's happening within that club or within that organization. Therefore, that's why I want to require my executive board representatives to attend the general body meetings, to accurately go there and be a part of the conversation so they can know what's going on.
I believe that it's important to have executive board members that may be voting members of clubs. I'm not going to require it, but if they're involved in a club, they're going to understand exactly how that club works better than anybody on the outside possibly could. Many clubs do things that aren't immediately obvious to outsiders, and someone involved in the club can bring that to light and represent it the best in their budget requests. And I believe that it's important to have people on the inside to understand exactly what really goes on.
To follow that, I understand due to your lack of experience, you may not be able to truly understand what the ramifications of that would be. However, that would prove for an unfair playing field. If Club A, Club B, and Club C have executive board representatives who are representing them, who are members of their club, but all the other clubs don't, then those executive board representatives are going to try to funnel more money to them. They're going to try to give them more resources just because inherently they have that relationship. And I believe that gives a very unfair advantage to those clubs. And that's something that we need to discourage and try to work around so that all clubs are more accurately and fairly represented within the Rensselaer Union.
To be clear, all clubs under my plan would be allowed to suggest their own e-board representatives, and this would not be these clubs get to suggest someone and these clubs don't. Everybody will be adequately represented.
Yes, but then you would choose what clubs get to pick the reps. You would say, hey, Club A, you get a rep. Club B, no, you don't.
How is that any
unfair.
different from the current system where the the president of the union can select arbitrarily their e-board representatives?
Because with an open call, you get the people who are truly interested. You don't have just people soliciting recommendations where you have to pick and choose what clubs are worthy, but instead you have a fair, full pool of worthy and kind of interested applicants, instead of just a specific pool from specific clubs on campus.
Okay, thank you for your responses. The next question comes to the audience, and it's for both of you. How do you feel about the e-board denying appeals for clubs to use reserve funds for their purposes, i.e. funding large purchases that were planned when the reserve was created? If you could start it off, Greg.
The fact that clubs are not being allowed to use their reserve accounts as they're intended is completely ridiculous and would not happen under the Bartel e-board. Club reserve funds are currently being very mistreated by the union, that if a club has requested money in order to save up for a longer-term project to be purchased in the future, they shouldn't be punished for doing so. They shouldn't be allowed to say, hey, you can't have that money that we've been putting aside for years. The whole point is that the club doesn't have to come to the e-board and say, hey, our thing just broke, we need $20,000 and we need it yesterday. Instead, they can add a little bit of money every year for the lifespan of the object and replace it when it needs to be done. If we don't allow clubs to access the reserves when they need it, then the whole system is bankrupt.
Was your question about accessing the reserves or about giving to the reserves?
I'm just saying how you feel about the e-board denying appeals for clubs to use reserve funds for large purposes.
To use reserve funds?
Yeah.
So I don't actually know where your question's coming from, because this year we did have a couple clubs come before us asking to utilize their reserve funds, and we were very allowing of this. Clubs did save up and put money towards their reserve funds. They maybe had to make sacrifices other places in their budgets to do so, and they have the right to utilize that in any way they seem fit, especially as it goes to these major and large purchases.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, how would you increase graduate involvement in student clubs? If you could start this off, Andrew.
Yes, so I have a very major focus around this. Currently, I want to create a student activity fee task force that's going to reanalyze how the graduate activity fee is spent. A lot of them were very upset with this year because they were given a new fee from the Institute. And I believe that it's the job of the students to look for a solution to this, to kind of weigh our options and say, how can we fix a solution to better our brethren as a student here, to better that specific student and those specific genre of student at RPI. To go on with increased representation, I believe that the graduate students deserve as fair representation as the breakdown of students as RPI gives. Therefore, they deserve an increased representation than just 2 that it was on the board this year. So I do plan on trying to solicit more applicants from the graduate pool to kind of give more spots to graduates so we can get that diverse opinion, that different standpoint that an undergrad may not have, so they can objectively say what they want from their specific and unique standpoint.
The question is about increasing graduate involvement in student clubs.
Yes.
I don't believe that that's necessary. Graduate students are very busy people with a reality that's completely removed from that of an undergraduate. Many of them have a spouse, many of them have kids, they have time commitments outside of classes. And it's no secret that we have clubs on campus. You can't go on the union website without seeing a dozen of them. If graduate students aren't getting involved with clubs, it's not because the clubs aren't good enough. It's simply because they don't have the time or the interest in them. I believe that we need to make sure that we reduce the activity fee so that the graduate students that are still involved in clubs pay towards their use of facilities, but those that don't have to pay for the undergraduates to participate in clubs. I think that we need to make sure that it's truly proportional to the use of the facilities.
This next question is just for Sedano. Do you have any specifics as to how you would set up the alumni donation site?
I do. This will be used on different levels and steps. It would go through in-student advancement, Mr. Greg Easton, and then it would go to the alumni donations, eventually to the cabinet, to kind of try to garner their approval to kind of start this process in a preliminary and maybe kind of base step in a way that we can objectively analyze the validity and the success of an organization and kind of a tool like this one.
Okay, thank you. My next question is for both of you, and it's, what is your stance on clubs on clubs having food budgets? If you could start this off, Greg.
My stance on club food budgets?
Yes.
The fact that we have a one-size-fits-all policy, you're allotted this much per member, or you're only allowed to have one in the fall, one in the spring, is kind of ridiculous. Every club has completely unique needs. What a multicultural club needs for food is very different than what embedded hardware needs for food. If your whole point of your club is to bring about cultural diversity, you're going to have food at almost every meeting because it's a huge part of culture. If you're like the RPI players, where you give members pizza instead of hiring outside professionals to do things, then you're saving a whole lot of money by buying a pizza instead of hiring outside workers. And we need to accommodate for that. One reception per semester is not going to build sets for the players. We need to treat every club on a case-by-case basis and really work with them to understand their needs and what exactly they want to use these funds for. We can't say you get this much and that's the end of the story.
Due to your lack of experience, you may not know this, but that's actually already done. Multicultural clubs do get special funding for the food they get because we understand the value there. We did offer for clubs that do an outward appearance, such as the poly, players, etc., specific club funding and more kind of an elaborate and more expanded food budget. However, I will say that I was one of the main pushers, and I was a very large and kind of major voice to allow for this. I was against cutting the reception fund budget down to once per semester. I was 100% not behind that. I did not believe in it, and I wanted to look for a solution with everyone, including on the executive board and on the student body. Therefore, I want to hopefully move to a place where we can allow for more food spending. We can allow for this basis that clubs depend on to be re-allowed and brought back to the clubs at whole.
Okay, this next question is just for Greg and it comes from an audience member. And it states, activity fee proportional use sounds like it could discourage poorer students from participating for fear that their fees will rise. How do you solve for this?
Can you just say the first part of that again before how will you solve this?
Activity fee proportional to use sounds like it could discourage poorer students from participating for fear that their fees will rise. How do you solve for this?
Now, I'll admit I'm not totally clear what the question is asking, because if it's saying, the students that use the clubs are going to pay every time they go to a club meeting, then that's completely absurd. That's not what I intend to do. I'm simply saying that if certain groups on campus, like fraternities and graduate students, use services at a lower rate, it seems like they should be charged accordingly. I don't believe that this necessarily means that the undergraduate rate needs to be increased. It simply means...
What do you mean by that? If they used it at a lower rate, then they shouldn't be charged for that. So if they use it less, or?
As I mentioned, graduate students and fraternity students too will have needs that are different from the independent undergraduates, and I respect that. If they don't attend club meetings, if they don't use the resources, if they don't do all the things that the student activity fee goes for, then they shouldn't be charged for services that they don't use.
Okay.
Can I
Thank
answer the
you.
question?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
First, I'd like to thank you, because that's pulled directly from my platform in the Student Activity Fee Task Force. I do plan on reanalyzing the Greek spectrum and how much Greeks spend their money, and on how much graduate students spend their money in the Student Activity Fee Task Force that I've made time in and time out. I believe that we have to have a re-look at how their money's being spent and the level of involvement that they give. Because right now, a lot of students say that this isn't necessarily fair, and that this isn't necessarily just for them to be charged at the same rate. And that's why I do want to create a program where we can look at this. We can say, how should your money be spent? How do you deserve to have your funds spent accurately and on a manner that you use them?
With regards to the comment that I pulled that from your speech, do you believe only one person can have a good idea?
I did not say that.
Okay, let's keep this on topic, please. Okay. Next question is, how much experience do you have in communicating with the administration? And I'd like you to start this off, Andrew.
Thank you for asking the question. I've actually worked as the news editor of the Rensselaer Polytechnic, which I had stated. There I had worked excessively and worked with very great length with administration. I met with them personally. I had a personal interview with Mr. Greg Easton, who's the current Vice President of Institute Advancement, and I've had conversations with them, and I've worked with them to kind of look for solutions in a casual and professional setting. So I'm ready to kind of tackle the task of having a more professional setting and working with them on a much more expanded rate than I currently am.
I'm sorry for a question about communication, but can you please repeat the question?
How much experience do you have in communicating with the administration?
Communicating with the administration. I believe that most of my experiences with communicating with the union's administration, I've worked with our student activities resource person in my duties as business manager of WRPI. As far as people outside of it, I've had limited experience. I've met with the dean of students multiple times in recent events and before that, but as far as the things like board of trustees, I've never met them. I've never met Dr. Jackson in person and spoken to her about any issues. I can't say I've done any of that.
Thank you. Next question is, do you plan on furthering any of the previous President of the Union's goals? If you could start that off, Greg.
I hope this debate has made it clear that I respect some of my opponent's opinions. The idea that the... previous, I'm sorry. There was a similar question in the GM candidate. Previous President of the Union, Aaron Amarello. Well...
It's okay.
The big thing that's going to happen no matter what is the budget's going to get done. I hope that was one of her goals because it happened, and I intend to make the next year's budget. The goal of making sure that all students have a chance to use the facilities that they're paying for makes perfect sense, and I think that that's going to continue no matter what. As far as specific goals, I'm at a loss.
Okay. I've worked extensively with Erin Morello this year, serving on the executive board, having met with her on quite a few times, and she kind of opened up the dialogue for communication between herself and the clubs and organizations on campus. She started kind of reaching out to the students, and I want to further that, bring it to the next level of true and open transparency between myself, the executive board, the Rensselaer Student Union, and the student body as a whole. Because as I said, it's the students' rights, being part of a student union, to know what's going on at all times.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, if you were not elected, would you stay involved in the Senate/E-Board? And how would you stay involved? And if you could start this question off, Andrew.
Yes. This year, it was a pleasure serving on the Rensselaer Union Executive Board. I can't say how much I enjoyed my opportunity there. Therefore, I'd want to stay as a member or on a committee or chair a committee if I wasn't elected, because I've truly enjoyed the experience that I've garnered there.
I've answered this question before to other people, and I've always said that if I do not win this election, I would want to be involved with the student union as long as I was in a position that gave me the ability to further my goals, express my beliefs freely, and make sure that they were respected. And I'll leave it as a question to the audience if they feel like that would be the case.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, how will you balance funding clubs and keeping costs down? You could start this off, Greg.
The idea of balancing costs, it's difficult. The incoming freshman class is a little bit smaller than the ones before it. Revenue from places like the bookstore is going down. Money going in is going down, but we still have a lot of students on campus. We need to make sure that they're being supported. It's still a large freshman class, even if it's a little bit smaller than the one before it. So we need to learn to do more with less, to make sure that we're prioritizing properly. We're making sure that the money is going to the places students want it to go, and that things that students don't use, that they don't want to use, aren't being paid for unnecessarily.
Okay, so I agree with a lot of that, but I do believe that we need to start offering more services, but we can't just have the financial burden sitting over the students of RPI. Therefore, I believe through this expanded alumni presence, through this alumni donation website, they'll be able to deliver that by taxing the students less, but ultimately offering them more. So ultimately, we don't have to make a sacrifice as it comes to budgeting or towards funding, but instead we can try to give as much as possible, but ultimately not have to be at the expense of the students.
Okay, my next question is, how will you balance communication? How will you communicate with students? What sort of medium will you use? Andrew?
So I plan on using all potential mediums. Students at RPI are very good with social media. They kind of know how to use those platforms. One would call them an expert. So I want to utilize these resources, whether it be Facebook, Reddit, Twitter, or even potentially in-person conversations. I want to continue to travel around to the Greek houses, go around to the halls, knock on people's doors, say, what are you happy about? What are you not happy about? What would you like in the Rensselaer Student Union? What could I do to make this a better place for everyone and for you personally?
Greg?
I also agree with that all forms of communication need to be used. In particular, I believe town hall meetings with the student body, club officers, athletic representatives, et cetera, would be very useful, and that people would come and voice their opinions, give input on key decisions before they have to be made. But that doesn't mean I'm going to neglect everything else. I'm going to make sure that we're online, that we're in print, that I have open office hours. People can contact me directly if they have concerns, and make sure that every mode of communication is available, because not everybody communicates the same way.
My next question is, how would you communicate better between the e-board and the clubs and help to be more top-down communication between the two? If you could start this off, Greg.
Top-down communication does not sound like a good idea to me. Communication needs to be between equals. We're all students here. The only difference is one group controls the budget and one group controls the club. I want to make sure that e-board representatives are meeting with club officers so that they can openly discuss their needs. This is what they want to do. This is what they need to do it. And that if the e-board representatives can be members of the club, if they can vote with it, if they're passionate about it, that leads to great communication. As far as communication with me, I believe that was brought up in the last question. It shouldn't be top-down, but a meeting of equals.
I actually disagree with that. I believe that all students have a right to be heard, whether they want it or not, and they all have a right to the information. Therefore, if they don't necessarily have an opinion or want to reach out, I believe it's our job to make sure that they get the information. In terms of an executive board representative, I want to expand their level of involvement by having them attend one general body meeting per semester of the clubs they represent. In doing so, as I had said earlier, they'll be a face and a name instead of just a random person on the end of an email. In hope, we'll be able to have a much stronger and much more elaborate communication structure between our executive board representatives and the student body and the clubs they represent.
Okay, I'd like to move on to closing statements, and if we could move on to that, I think that'd be good. Do we have any audience questions? Aiden? Or more? Yeah, we can bring them up.
So how about that weather, huh? Yeah.
Okay. All right. We're going to move on to closing statements. So,
Not very good questions, were they?
I'm sorry. Okay, we could have Andrew move on first. Go
Okay.
first.
As I said in my opening, what I want to do is create a truly student union. Not be this the executive board's union, or the presidents of the union's union, or the administration's union, or the cabinet's union, but instead be this our union. Make sure that everyone here has a place and a home, so we can make this truly a student union. I believe through increased transparency, through bringing a stronger student voice to the Rensselaer Union Executive Board, and creating an atmosphere of student creativity and initiative, we can truly get there. Unions were funded on the idea of creating collaboration, innovation, and ideas. And we need to get back to that. We need to get back to the idea that all students have a right to be heard and to be noticed, and that they all have the right to share their ideas in a free fashion. And that's what I want to get to as being president of the union, and truly bring a different sense and a different kind of morale to the Rensselaer Union as a whole.
Okay. And if we could have Greg with his closing statement.
Well, I hope I've adequately explained all my positions for you tonight already. That I believe that student voices need to be the guiding force of the union. I want to make sure that e-board representatives are working very well with their clubs. I want to make sure that there's a fair appeals process with a separate board to appeal to if your club budget isn't going the way it needs to be. But if I haven't addressed any of your concerns, I have a Reddit AMA up right now. I'm answering questions all the time, tinyurl.com/Gregs-AMA. And you can ask me questions there. You can email me, barteg@rpi.edu. And other than that, I'd just like to thank you all for coming out, and have a great night.
Thank you all for having a great debate. Wish you the best.
Thank you guys. Really appreciate being able to speak in front of you.